All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, our objective for today is that students will be able to use the distributive property to rewrite expressions. Okay, so distributive property is something that you guys learned in, I want to say, fifth grade or sixth grade. We did a little bit of it earlier this year, so technically, this should be a bit of a review. So, you really want to make sure that you're focused because we're going to really need to use the distributive property this year and also next year. All right. So just to review what we were doing last week, we started looking at some examples of some pools. So we had a pool and it was surrounded by border tiles, right? Just forgive my drawing, it's not very great. And if you recall, what we were trying to figure out is how many tiles went around the outside of the pool, right? And if you just had a pool sitting in front of you, you could sit down and count up the tiles, but we started figuring out faster ways to figure out how many tiles you had by grouping them, right? So like one method would be okay to say, okay, I have these tiles going around the sides plus your 4 corner tiles on the outside, right? And depending on how you looked at counting those tiles up, you ended up with different expressions to represent that. So this expression where you count up the 4 sides plus the 4 corners led us to this one here, 4s plus 4. There's another one, 4s plus 1, 4 times s plus 1, s plus s plus s plus s plus 4, or 2s plus 2 times s plus 2, right? But the main idea here is that all of these here, right, are equivalent. Remember, when we talk about equivalent in math, that really just means that two things are equal to each other. They have the same value, right? We don't say equals because they actually do look different, but they have the same value to each other, right? Just like I could say, 4 plus 2 is the same thing as 6. They don't look exactly the same, but they have the same value once you add everything together, right? Now, last week when we were showing that they were equivalent, we did that by substituting in values. Today what we're going to be doing is we're actually reviewing, like I said earlier, the distributive property, which is going to show us mathematically that these expressions have to be equal to each other, all right? Now, if you go into a math textbook and look at the distributive property, you would see something that looks like this. It says for any real numbers a, b, and c, a multiplied by the sum b plus c is equal to ab plus ac, right? So this here is typically what we're talking about when we say the distributive property, or same exact thing with a minus instead of a plus, right? Now, just an example to show you that this works, I could do this both ways. So if I'm thinking about 4 times 7 plus 2, you can think about using the order of operations, right? Do what's in the parentheses first. 7 plus 2 gives you 9, so I need to add those first, and then 4 times 9 is going to give me 36, right? What the distributive property basically tells us is to take what's on the outside of the parentheses, distribute it. So a times b gives you ab. A times c gives you ac. So I could say 4 multiplied by 7 plus 4 multiplied by 2, right? 4 times 7, 28, plus 4 times 2 is 8, 36, right? But now you might be saying, right, why am I going to use the distributive property here when this looks like a whole lot more work than this over here, right? And the idea is that you wouldn't use the distributive property. That's not what the distributive property is meant for, right? What the distributive property is meant for is situations where you're dealing with variables, right? So an example like this, 4 times s plus 1, the distributive property tells us that that is equal to 4s plus 4, right? So let me just show that to you over here. 4 times s plus 1. If I was trying to do this, right, order of operations, I'd say do what's in the parentheses first, s plus 1. I don't know what s is, so I can't just add these two together. I have no idea what that could be. But I can actually simplify that a bit with the distributive property and say, okay, 4 multiplied by s, which you can just write as 4s, plus 4 multiplied by 1, which is just 4. So the distributive property tells us mathematically that these two expressions are in fact equivalent, all right? Now, you might not think that it's simple, right? It's not really simplified. This one has parentheses, this one doesn't. They both have 2 terms, so we haven't really done too much to simplify things. So some other terminology that we use sometimes is we say that something that's written like this with the parentheses, so the a times b plus c, the 4 times s plus 1, right? The things we had on the left side of the expression over here, and say over here, those are written in factored form, right? Remember in math, when we talk about a factor means that you're multiplying. So that's why that's called factored form. Now, the things on the other side where we don't have the parentheses and we're just adding, that's referred to as the expanded form, all right? So now, what we're gonna do next is you guys are gonna first just practice trying to identify some expressions as being written in either its factored form or its expanded form. And I don't want you guys to think about this too much, right? There's a pretty clear condition that's gonna tell you what's the factored form, what's the expanded form. So for each of these expressions here, all I want you to do is to type into these boxes if you think that this expression here is factored or expanded. So if you think it's factored, write factored. If you think it's expanded, write expanded, right? That's it. So pause the video. This part here should really not take you more than 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute, all right? Now, once you're done, the next thing that you're gonna do is you're gonna actually practice using the distributive property, right? So I'll go over one example for you, and they're gonna start to get a little bit harder as you go down towards the bottom. The one with the negatives, be careful, right? We have done this in the past, so this should be a review. I want you to try it yourself and really try to come to the Zoom session so I can explain these and help you with them, okay? So, very first one, 2 times x plus 1. With the distributive property, right, follow the way that I do this. The thing on the outside, the 2, gets multiplied by both terms inside of the parentheses. So first I have 2 times x plus, because I have a plus here, 2 times 1. Now this one is pretty simple, but I'm just writing all the steps out to show you, right? So 2 times x is equal to 2x plus 2 times 1 is equal to 2. Now, this is our final answer, right? I cannot do anything else with this, right? These are not like terms, so don't try to add them together. What a lot of students do at this point is they'll say, okay, so 2x plus 2, that gives us, they'll either say 4x or they'll say 4. But neither of those are correct, right? So don't do that. We can't add them together. You are done at this step here, 2x plus 2. Now, second thing you want to be careful about is the most common mistake that students make here is they forget to distribute to the second term inside of parentheses. And let me explain what I mean there. So a lot of times students will say, okay, so 2 times x plus 1 is equal to, they go, actually what they usually do is they don't draw the arrows, which is why they forget it. So they'll say, okay, so 2x plus 1, that's it. But the key thing that they forgot here, which a lot of students are going to end up doing, is they forgot this second step of multiplying the 2 times the 1. So to fix this, it'd actually be plus 1 times 2, right? This here is what was missing. So be careful. You always multiply what's on the outside of the parentheses by both terms inside of the parentheses, okay? So take a few minutes, pause the video, work on this section here, and then as soon as you're done with that section, you're gonna go on to the next section, right? So, similar idea, right? Only thing that has changed in this section here is that now I have a coefficient, if you remember that word, in front of the x inside the parentheses. And it's a small change, but if you're not sure, right? It can seem really hard. But I'm going to show you it's actually pretty simple. We're doing the same exact thing. So first I would say 2 multiplied by 2x. And again, I'm going to write this out. 2 times 2x plus, don't forget to multiply by your second term. 2 times 1. All right? Now, this right here, 2 times 2x, right? It's really 2 times 2 times x. I don't know what x is, but I know what 2 times 2 is, right? So in a situation like this, you're really just multiplying the numbers together and then adding that variable on at the end. So 2 times 2 is 4, and I need to keep the x here. Don't drop the x. So 4x plus 2 is going to be my final expression there. Okay? Now, take a few minutes, try it again. Make sure you come to the Zoom session so I can help you with this. When you're done the push yourself section, I want you to give it a shot. This is closer to what we're going to be doing next year in algebra. All right? So good luck, and I will see you all later.